Hello, crafty friends and doll lovers. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Melody. Today, I am going to share with you the 2 finished projects for the Freebie Friday personal challenge. And for those of you who may not be familiar, the pixiefaire.com website, each Friday, they release one of their patterns for free. I download that pattern, and then my goal is to sew that pattern and then come back and share it with you the following week. This was a great week as far as crafting, but it was a so-so week as far as sewing. This week I had the opportunity to participate in a virtual getaway, and my machine is a baby lock machine. All of my machines are baby lock, and I recently acquired a 10 needle embroidery machine, and I wanted to learn how to use that machine. So it was 5 days, 3 hours a day of learning how to use that machine. So the great thing is I'm not as intimidated by the machine, and I'm excited about using it. I even got a project finished. This is one of the projects that I worked on. It says sewing is cheaper than therapy. So I am happy that I got that done, but the sewing was completely off. Well, mostly off in how I felt. It felt off to me. And the reason why I say that is because, number one, I didn't get an opportunity to really do a lot of it because I was doing the getaway. But the other thing is, for some reason, reading the patterns, I try to read through a pattern before I attempt to sew it. And somehow reading the instructions just weren't clicking. And I don't know, I got frustrated. Some of the frustration was actually some things within the pattern itself, but I think most of the frustration was it just wasn't sinking in what I was supposed to do. And you'll see that I had to kind of improvise on one of these outfits, but I did get them done, so I'm going to share them with you. The first project is the Frog Princess Fashions, this dress pattern called the Waikiki Waves dress. It is a confident beginner pattern, and it's designed to fit 18-inch dolls. Overall, I really like this pattern. There was probably a kind of a minor detail that I would have liked to have seen, but I'll get to that in a minute. So here is the pattern. Oh, here is the finished dress. I'm gonna take her off. Okay, so sorry about that noise. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is the finished pattern, and what I ended up doing was I used 2 fabrics. This is the main fabric, and this is the Godet, the insert, and it's not really distinguishable that much because it's very close to the main fabric. But I also use that fabric for the ruffles, and I went with the sleeveless version of this. Now, there were a couple of things that I didn't really particularly like, and again, this is a situation where the pattern instructions probably should have given an instruction to stay stitch the neckline, and I normally do it, and I didn't do it this time, and I think because I didn't do it, it's causing this to pull away. It's not fitting as smoothly, and to me, I think that's a sign that it may have stretched while I was sewing it, or it could be the way the pattern was designed. I did notice that the pictures, let me see, Addie, are you going to stand up by yourself? Let's see if she'll stand up by herself. If you look close, okay, there you go. The neckline is pulling away on the pattern too. So I figured it was either the way it was drafted or the fact that there was no stay stitching. So I didn't have time to try to sew it again with the stay stitching to see if that made a difference. But if I were to sew this Waikiki wave dress again, I would definitely stay stitch the neckline. The other thing is it has a Velcro closure in the back, and it tells you to sew the Velcro closure, but it gives you no instructions as to how long this Velcro should be. I sewed it about down to here. I tried to gauge it from the dress pattern. I think it may probably need to go a little lower, but I am a person that if I purchase a pattern, now granted this one was free because I was able to download it, but when I purchase a pattern, I would like to see the pattern give me everything that I need to be able to successfully complete the pattern and not assume some things. I mean, you can assume that a person knows the sewing terminology and that they know how, the basic things like they know how to operate a sewing machine. But I think it's always helpful to make sure you are kind of spelling out what size hook and loop tape to use. I said Velcro. Velcro is a trademark name, but the hook and loop tape, if it had told me what width to make the hook and loop tape and the length to make the hook and loop tape. This pattern says it's for a confident beginner, but a confident beginner may not have sewn doll clothes before and may not be familiar with how you're supposed to sew on the Velcro closure. So I think if the pattern had gone into a little bit more detail there, it would have been a good idea. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not a pattern designer, and kudos to anyone who can design patterns and then give instructions. But if I were a pattern tester for Frog Princess Fashions, I would have suggested that you give the measurements of how wide the hook and loop tape needed to be and how long it should be to sew it onto the closure. But overall, it was kind of fiddly attaching the ruffles, and I didn't get them exactly equal, but other than that, I think it was a pretty straightforward sew. The Godets are kind of tricky to sew because you want to sew them where there's no pucker and there's no hole, and I was able to do it successfully. And you have to do it 4 times, so I used the technique. It worked each of the 4 times. I'm going to get Addie back up on her stand, and so I did film a video to show how I sewed the Godets. I have one camera, and I am most of the time doing these videos by myself. So I had to use what I have to try to angle the camera so that you could see it. I have not gone back to look at it to see how successful I was when I edit this video before I posted. If I was able to successfully capture what I was trying to explain with the Godets, then I will insert that in this video. These pieces here represent the center front piece, the side piece, and I just cut these out of scrap fabric just so that I can demonstrate. And then this is the Godet piece. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is that there's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Let me use my stylus all the way around this piece. So you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance up at the top here. You have a 1/4 inch seam allowance along each side. And of course, you have the 1/4 inch hem here. You want to connect these 3 pieces together. And the trick is when you join the Godet here, you want the join to be a smooth join with no puckering. So you want it to end at a point. The most important thing to keep in mind is that this 1/4 inch seam allowance is very important. And it would depend on the pattern. Of course, if you were using a pattern with a different seam allowance, the important thing is to be consistent with your seam allowances. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this. I didn't do this sewing. I pretty much eyeballed it, but if you line up, I'm just going to put a mark kind of right in the center, which is where I believe the line will cross. So your goal is, and you probably can't see it because this is a pattern, this because of the print of this fabric, but your goal when you're sewing is to have your seam line cross at the same point. So here we go. I'm going to line this up at the hem, and the pattern instructs you to sew from your hem up to the top of the Godet. And I have on the bed of my machine, which I'm not sure if you can really see it, but I have a 1/4 inch mark that I'm going to use here. Uh-oh. Come on. So I'm maintaining that 1/4 inch, and you probably can't see it from this angle, but that's my dot. And if I keep the 1/4 inch seam, it's gonna hit that dot. And I'm gonna go ahead off the page, the Godet, the end of the Godet. Okay, so that's the one side. And this is a no-no. What I did to start's a no-no because you get that bunching, but this is just a sample piece. So sew it all the way off and then press it. That is your first join, and I've pressed it. Now, this is the side front piece, and you have to attach that to this side of the Godet. This time I'm going to pin it. Oops. Okay, notice when I pin, if you can see that, when I pin this, I am pinning it, keeping this side of the Godet out of the way and the center front out of the way. So you're pinning it, basically folding back. Let me see if that's a better view. So think of it as this is folded back. So I'm going to pin this with this part out of the way. And hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense as we go along. Okay, so when you sew this end, you're still going to sew from here to here. And you're going to keep that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Back stitch. Hopefully I won't get that little knot. There we go. So if you keep this 1/4 inch seam allowance, it should cross without sewing the other piece. And let's see, because I'm kind of sewing blind here because I didn't take the time to mark it. Okay, here we go. So see how, oh, where are my scissors? I'm gonna cut this piece of thread here. And oh, I just snipped my Godet. Okay, so see how it crossed at this point? That's what you're going for. So when you open it up, you have, before I even sew the rest of the seam, you see that it's already gonna cross at a point. See that? I'm gonna press this and then come back. So here's the Godet sewn to the center front and the side front. You see that when it's pressed, the Godet is flat. And it's there's the point where they intersect. So of course you're going to be following your pattern instructions. So the next thing after you do what the pattern tells you to do is you have to close up this seam here. Okay, see there, the goal again is to hit, when you finish stitching, you want to finish stitching at that dot. So however you have to mark it, I would suggest you mark it either with a, appropriate marking tool, the appropriate temporary marking tool. And so this is where they intersect. So I'm marking my pen, I'm sticking my pen in where they intersect at the point. So when I sew this top piece, I want to sew it where it's stopping at that point. So you're going to line up your pattern pieces, and again, I'm not going to sew the entire length, again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And here is where my dot, here's where my seams intersect. So we're going to sew carefully. See if that worked. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to press this seam, and when I press this seam, I'm going to press it open. Here you are. If you look there, it's joined up at the point here. There's no hole and there is no puckering. It's a smooth join. This is the second project that I finished this week. It's the Dance Time, an intermediate level sewing pattern designed to fit 18-inch dolls. I shared with you last week that I was going to make this view, but because I misread the pattern instructions, I ended up making this view. The pattern instructions tell you to sew the center front and then the sides and leave the center back seam open, or not sewn, unsewn. I interpreted the pattern to sew the center back, the center front, and the side seams. So I ended up sewing it into a tube before I was ready, and the pattern needs to be flat, or the garment needs to be flat with that center back seam open in order to attach the tool. And because this is a performance knit and I was concerned about taking my seam ripper through this and damaging it, snagging it, whatever, I decided, oh well, we're gonna have to go with the second view. And I wasn't prepared to sew that because I did not have this little ruffle piece. So I used what I had in my stash. And you'll see it's two separate pieces. The shorts are basically taking advantage of these. Let me take this off. These shorts are taking advantage of the stretch to hold them on. I didn't really like how that look. And it also, because it is sewn, the center back seam is sewn. I don't have her wig glued. I forgot I hadn't glued her wig on. Because I don't have the center back seam is sewn closed. The only way to get this onto this doll is to slide it up over. Slide it up over here versus pulling it. It's wide enough to pull over her head, but once you put this ruffle on, the ruffle doesn't stretch like the knit fabric does. So you would end up popping stitches to try to pull it overhead. So it has to come up this way, which I understand is probably why the scoop neck is so wide. I don't really like this aesthetic. I think I shared with you in a previous video. I don't like when you have a doll that has part vinyl and part cloth. I usually go towards those designs that hide the cloth portion of the body. So I don't like this being here. The other thing that I found interesting is that when you look at the supply list for this pattern, it tells you that you need, obviously, the fabric itself, but it says optional 3 yards of 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch ribbon. I can't figure out what that is for. And the only thing that it seems like it would be for is this. Now you will see this is a 1/4 inch lace trim that I found. This does not look like that black ruffle there. This ruffle looks like it's at least 1.25 inches wide, or long in this case. So if I go by the pattern supplies, if this is where that ribbon was supposed to go, I don't think it's given the aesthetic that's shown in this picture here. And 3 yards, I'm not sure why you'd need 3 yards of 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch ribbon. If anyone has made the Dance Time pattern by Karen Lorraine Design, and you've made it and there is a use for 3 yards of 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch ribbon, please let me know in the comments below. What did I learn from this pattern? I learned how to work with performance knits and how it is definitely advisable to use a tearaway stabilizer or a coffee filter or some type of tissue paper, something, as I said, between the fabric and the feed dogs on your sewing machine. Will I sew it again? Probably not. I didn't really like working with this fabric. Not so much sewing it, I just didn't like working with the fabric at all. So I probably will not sew this pattern again. I haven't given up on sewing with this stretch knit, and maybe with a different pattern with a better aesthetic, or aesthetic that I like better. Maybe I will attempt that, but I did not really like how this turned out. But I said I was going to share with you the good and the bad, so I am. And this is something to just say that everybody has an off day, week, month, year, whatever, but it's okay. It's okay not to be perfect. You learn something. I learned something. So, I'm good with that. I do know that when I get tired or when I feel rushed, it's probably not a good idea for me to sit down to a sewing machine. And this week, because majority of my week was spent in front of a computer and my embroidery machine, I did not have as much time as I normally spend in my sewing room. And I think it showed, because I just couldn't get it together when it came to sewing. If you sew, do you have those off days and those off weeks? And if you do, what do you do to overcome that? The pattern that was released this past Friday is a pattern by Kindred Thread. and it's called 50s shirtwaist dress. This is the dress. I think it's cute. I like all three of these views. I will probably do the, I'm backwards here. Okay. I'll probably do the sleeveless view. That's what I'm thinking I might do. But I have not found fabric in my fabric stash. I try to check my stash first to see if there's anything that will work. And if I have something that will work, I don't have enough of it. So it looks like it's going to be another trip to the fabric store. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.